You've probably seen the headlines: Harbaugh tagged with a 10-year show cause stacked on top of an existing 4-year penalty, Michigan facing a projected multi-million-dollar financial package that could top $30 million, and former analyst Connor Stalions hit with an 8-year show cause, all without a postseason ban. That kind of outcome alone is shocking. But the real story lives in the NCAA's lengthy 74-page report. Its sheer size signals more than a quick ruling. It's a detailed investigation showing a network Stalions himself, called the KGB, where people were placed in precise seats to record opposing sidelines and funnel the footage back to Ann Arbor. We'll move from those headline punishments into how the scouting network actually worked, what investigators uncovered, and why fines replaced the traditional postseason ban, a shift that shapes the entire business of college football enforcement. And it all starts with the operation so elaborate, it drew comparisons to a Cold War spy agency. The NCAA's investigation gave this scheme a label most fans never expected to see in a football report: a KGB-style network. That language wasn't chosen for drama. It underscored how the sign-stealing system had been designed with layers of secrecy and structure, more like covert intelligence than casual scouting. Investigators emphasized that this wasn't limited to a handful of games or one rogue staffer acting alone. It was deliberate, repeatable, and coordinated over multiple seasons. The evidence showed just how far it went. The NCAA tied Connor Stalions and his network to 56 instances of off-campus, in-person scouting across 52 separate contests, all targeting 13 future opponents. These weren't random outings either. The tickets were part of a deliberate strategy. In 2022 alone, Stalions spent nearly $35,000 on seats bought through secondary markets to make sure his people had clear sidelines views. The purpose was straightforward: place someone close enough to record every signal flash between coaches and players, then get that video back to Michigan. At the center of the operation was Stalions himself. He managed seating locations, camera angles, and the flow of material so that nothing was wasted. Cameras aimed directly at assistant coaches and players, capturing the hand signals, the boards, and the gestures. All of that was fed back into a central hub in Ann Arbor, where the footage could be broken down into usable patterns. This wasn't improvisation. It was mapped and tracked carefully, reinforcing why investigators leaned on the KGB comparison in the first place. Once the clips made it to staffers, the decoding began. Investigators documented thousands of signals being translated into predictable call sheets. The end result was not a guaranteed answer key, but a set of catalogs that dramatically cut down the guesswork on Saturdays. By the time games arrived, Michigan staff could enter with a far clearer picture of what their opponent might attempt, play after play. That competitive edge is why the NCAA classified the violations as a Level 1 case, the most severe tier, reserved for major breaches that shake compliance to its core. And here's where the report raised a deeper question. Who, inside Michigan, knew this was happening, and why didn't compliance safeguards stop it earlier? Investigators concluded there was a willful intent not to learn more, paired with attempts to destroy or withhold materials that could have shed light on the scope of the operation. That line in the report hit on the cultural problem as much as the tactical one, spotlighting leadership and oversight failures that shaped the entire fallout, which naturally leads to the central figure under scrutiny. With penalties stacking and language this severe, the next question is unavoidable. How does Jim Harbaugh, one of the most vocal figures in football, respond to the allegation that he failed to enforce control? Harbaugh's response to the sanctions was starkly different from his usual blunt, outspoken style. When pressed by reporters, all he offered was a short line: "I'm done engaging." No elaboration, no defense, nothing beyond that refusal to participate in the conversation. His complete silence came at the very same moment the NCAA issued a career-altering penalty, a new 10-year show cause order that, when paired with his existing 4-year show cause, effectively creates a 14-year prohibition on returning to the college sidelines. The report didn't hold back in describing why. It said Harbaugh failed to enforce compliance standards, neglected his duty as a head coach, and repeatedly refused to cooperate during the investigation. So while he shuts down every question with silence, the NCAA goes on record painting him as the opposite of responsible leadership. That sharp divide, Harbaugh saying nothing against a 74-page report full of criticism, makes his quiet all the more glaring. For context, his first 4-year show cause stemmed from earlier recruiting violations, a significant penalty in its own right. But this second sanction goes even further. The 10-year order doesn't even start until the first one ends on August 7, 2028, meaning he's barred from college coaching oversight until 2038. Put simply, that timeline marks the end of a college head coaching career, unless an athletic director is prepared to endure years of restrictions and scrutiny just to employ him. In practice, almost no program takes that risk. In football terms, he's been pushed out of the college game. So what does a show cause really do? Under this kind of sanction, if a university wants to hire the coach, the school must appear before NCAA enforcement staff to explain why it believes the hire is justified. During the sanction period, the coach himself is prohibited from taking part in any athletically related duties of that program, and if the NCAA allows the hire at all, it can mandate a full season suspension. For athletic directors, the steep oversight requirements and threat of added penalties make it essentially a non-starter. That's why the sanction operates as a de facto blackball, shutting the door without formally banning him for life. But while college football has placed that barrier in front of him, Harbaugh's path in the NFL is unaffected. The NCAA has no jurisdiction over the league, and multiple reports note the NFL has no mechanism requiring it to enforce NCAA sanctions. While the league declined direct comment, early indications suggested little appetite to mirror the NCAA's punishment. That reality explains how Harbaugh could step seamlessly into his current role with the Los Angeles Chargers, while his college reputation was taking a direct hit. And if the NCAA's penalties reshaped his legacy, they also raised another figure into sharper focus. The man credited with building the entire scheme at the ground level, because the story of how Michigan's edge was created doesn't begin with its head coach. It begins with the staffer who styled himself as the architect of the operation. Connor Stalions' story begins far from the spotlight, rising from a volunteer assistant in 2017 to a recruiting analyst by 2022. On paper, it was a modest climb, but according to the NCAA, he used that position to engineer a detailed network that changed the way Michigan prepared for opponents. Over 3 seasons, he organized 56 scouting trips across 52 games, targeting 13 different future opponents. Those operations, they argue, mark the line between traditional sideline observation and a coordinated intelligence system built to give Michigan its edge. Stalions didn't just map out a network, he funded it. In 2022 alone, records show he personally spent nearly $35,000 on tickets purchased through the secondary market, placing scouts in seats with perfect angles to capture opposing signals. Some of those scouts were interns, others unaffiliated acquaintances recruited for one-off assignments. Each was given a clear job: record, relay, and feedback, every gesture, board, and sideline cue. That footage would eventually make its way into Michigan's prep materials. The imagery of the scheme became almost impossible to ignore when Stalions himself appeared on Central Michigan's sideline during a 2023 game wearing CMU gear to blend in. Investigators confirmed he had been in disguise, standing just feet from coaches, watching plays unfold from inside the opponent's bench area. That moment crystallized the seriousness of the operation. It wasn't theoretical anymore. It was visible, happening in real time, and caught on camera. Part of what made the whole scheme possible was the NCAA's own playing environment. Unlike the NFL, college programs don't use helmet headsets, so hand signals and signs remain the primary means of communication. Observing those signals during live games wasn't against the rules. Sending scouts to film them in advance was Stalions bridged that gap with technology and manpower, transforming what had always been a gray area tactic into something that looked more like institutionalized reconnaissance. That alone would have drawn heavy sanctions, but investigators said the cover-up was just as damaging. According to their findings, Stalions told an intern to delete photos, texts, and videos tied to the scouting efforts. He later admitted his film is at the bottom of a pond, along with his disposed phone. The Committee on Infractions described his non-cooperation as among the worst they had ever seen. On top of that, he allegedly instructed a Michigan athlete to provide false statements to staff during questioning, saying bluntly that you can technically lie your ass off. Those behaviors explain why the NCAA didn't just see him as part of the system, but as its architect. His public comments only amplified the contrast. In a documentary, he bragged about decoding signals and even referenced being given a game ball. Under oath, he distanced himself from those claims, arguing he had only speculated about its meaning. The inconsistency, investigators said, revealed someone adapting his story to the circumstances. The result was an 8-year show cause order, effective immediately. For any athletic director, hiring Stalions would now mean stepping into NCAA reviews, oversight restrictions, and likely suspensions. It is, for all practical purposes, a block on his college career. Meanwhile, not every Michigan staffer linked early in media coverage was implicated. The NCAA did clear at least one assistant coach of wrongdoing. That nuance highlights both the scale of the system and the fact that responsibility centered most heavily on Stalions himself. And that distinction leads to a larger point. The penalties Michigan received weren't only about one staffer or even one head coach. They were a signal that the NCAA's approach to discipline itself has entered a new phase. This case isn't just about Michigan, it's about how the NCAA chose to punish. The committee explicitly said a postseason ban would unfairly penalize current athletes who had no connection to the violations. So instead of pulling championships or eliminating bowl games, they converted traditional penalties into financial equivalents and recruiting limits. The package includes a $50,000 base fine, an added calculation of 10% of the football budget, the projected loss of postseason revenue in 2025-26, and the financial equivalent of 10% of scholarships. Industry estimates say the total could climb into the tens of millions. Many observers see this as a turning point toward financial enforcement and leadership accountability. For compliance officers, recruiters, and sports business pros, does this make institutions more likely to pay to avoid bans? Or will it push conferences and regulators to raise the cost of cheating? Tell us which outcome you think is likeliest and why. And if you follow sports business and compliance, subscribe for case studies like this that break down enforcement, money, and hiring risk.